What is going on, guys, and welcome to our live fighting breakdown for UFC Houston. We're going to be breaking down most of the fights on this card. I'll explain a little bit more of that later. But also, I'm going to be picking a winner here, and we're going to be talking about where the value might be here as well, because it's easy for me to go and pick a winner, but picks are different from bets. So I'm going to be, throughout the video, I'm going to be cluing you guys in to where I think there could be value on this card. Just because I pick, you know, just because I pick, Jean Paul Lebezioni to win, doesn't mean I'm laying money on that. You know what I'm saying? Maybe I don't agree with the line. Maybe I don't agree with the implied probability price tag associated with his line. All right, so first fight on the card, and I'm not going to be talking about the women's fights too much because it's bad enough, in my opinion. There's some girls that I'm really excited for, like Chanel Dyer, Michelle Montague, Kayla Harrison, girls that are actually super entertaining to watch. But for the most part, to me, I don't find these fights entertaining. It's bad enough we have to watch them. I'm not going to, go into too much depth breaking them down unless they're super exciting. But this one, Crispy Carly Judice is pretty exciting. But so Carly, super high volume, also absorbs a lot of strikes. Juliana Miller is going to have to get this fight to the ground to have any success at all. I think Carly's just going to be the far faster striker, and that's really what it comes down to, and that's all we're really going to get into that one with. I don't, well, first of all, let's talk some value. I do think that earlier in the week, Carly Judice was a little bit more parlayable at, minus 350, but the line has shifted. She's minus 700 now, and maybe minus 400, maybe no more than minus 400. I'd lay on, Carly Judice if we're throwing her in a parlay, but minus 700 on a women's MMA fight is wild. Absolutely wild. Will not be parlaying her at minus 700. All right, next we've got Jordan Leavitt, the Monkey King, taking on Yadier Del Valle. We got Jordan Monkey King coming in at 12-3. He's 2-1 in his last three. He's going to be 5'9" with a 71-inch reach. Yadier Del Valle, 10-0 undefeated prospect, 3-0 in his last three, standing at 5'9", coming in at 146 with a 69-inch reach. Something I want to highlight first here is this is going to be Jordan Leavitt's first fight at featherweight. I thought he was kind of a big lightweight, so I kind of want to see what he looks like as a featherweight. I want to see how this weight cut affects him. He's got some really good jiu-jitsu, and he's got some good offensive wrestling as well. He's got sneaky, awkward strike style, right? We saw him get that knockout over Victor Martinez with those knees. But he's really sneaky, and he completely, in his last fight, he completely rinsed Kurt Hollabaugh, who is a BJJ black belt, on the mat. And yeah, I'm thinking, I don't know. Yadi's sitting at minus 400. There was, like I said, similar to Carly Judice, I was thinking there was some more value on Yadier Del Valle earlier in the week, but not anymore. But Yadi coming off of that scandalous win over Isaac Dolgarian, where he was the betting underdog and his line came crashing down right before the fight starts, like earlier in the day before the fight starts, and a ton of money came in on that round one prop, right? Isaac Dolgarian goes out there, shoots a takedown, stops running his legs, right? Lets Del Valle get the position, right? And then he proceeds to let Del Valle get his back and then fake fight a rear naked choke. And him and his coach, maintaining, that fight wasn't fixed, and it probably wasn't on their end. It probably was not fixed on their end, It was fixed on the other end, where Isaac Dolgarian went out there and did absolutely nothing and just let him get submitted in round one. Paired with that suspicious line movement, I'm thinking that there's a reason why the FBI is investigating this, right? So before that, he's 3-0. This guy's like a blue chip prospect. Pulling up some of his last wins. Oh yeah, knocking out. Yeah. No, draw. Yeah. No, yeah, he got that sub win over. Yeah, Connor Matthews is not UFC level. And that Dana White's Contender Series fight, he did look pretty good. I think. All right, so there was a clip of Yadi's coach talking about how physically strong he was, and so that's where that's what I'm kind of interested to see here is how the strength and physical presence. Like Yadi Noval's a pretty thick featherweight. You know what I mean? And I think he's going to be thicker than Levitt. Levitt's, longer and clunkier looking. But yeah, Yadier Delvalle, yeah, I'm thinking he's going to be like just a thicker, more physical fighter. As far as the striking goes, Yadier Delvalle definitely carries more power on the feet. Jordan Levitt's striking is just so weird and awkward. So it's like it's kind of hard for people to get, like we saw it in the Trey Ogden fight, like that split decision against Trey Ogden. He like his timing and weird strike style got the better. Like I think Jordan Levitt's base is karate. His weird awkward karate style got the better of Trey Ogden in those scenarios. I know it was a split decision. It was a close fight. But I'm curious to see because I think initially if Yadir Davai doesn't just blast a takedown, which he could, we did see Levitt get submitted against Chase Huber and other guys that are better at grappling. I'm not sure who has the better jiu-jitsu. That's another thing I'm curious to see here, and I think it's gonna obviously we'll tell as the fight plays out. But Jordan Levitt's got excellent jiu-jitsu. Like I said, he completely dominated Kurt Hallbaugh in his last time out. We cashed on that sub prop there in the premium too, so that was a great bet. But yeah, as far as how this fight plays out, I think Yadi could maybe look to clip him on the feet, and then mix in the takedowns to make his striking more effective. I don't think that Jordan Levitt's got some pretty decent, counter wrestling, defensive wrestling, but Yadir Dovaye, I'm thinking, is just gonna be like levels ahead in the power, and so I think he could land a really powerful shot and potentially also mix in the grappling. So for my official prediction, give me Yadier Del Valle by sub. I'm thinking by sub. I think there was value closer to when he was like a minus 250 favorite. But now parlayable maybe at minus 400. I don't know. I'm curious to see how this weight cut affects Levitt. So moving on. Let's check the chat too. Let's check the chat. In the meantime, we got Phil Rowe taking on John Paul Leboziani. All right, chat. Chat. Nobody in the chat yet. There we go. Okay, cool. Yeah, no, nobody in the chat yet. That's fine. We will be having some people in the chat later on. some fun guests. I invited a bunch of people. All right, so we got Phil Rowe taking on John Paul Leboziani, right? So Phil Rowe, coming in at 11-6, standing at 6'3", 80.5-inch reach. And we got John Paul Leboziani making his UFC debut. He's coming off of that very quick knockout win on the Contender Series, standing at 5 feet 11 inches tall, 72-inch reach. I want to first talk about Phil Rowe's fight style and where there could be value on Phil Rowe in certain matchups, right? So Phil Rowe's a guy that'll go out there, take his beating, lose every minute of the fight up until he starts winning, right? This guy's got, a decent gas tank and like good finishing ability in round 3. We saw it in that Ange Lusa fight where I'm thinking he was down 2-0 in that fight. And he came back in round 3 and was able to knock out Angelusa. He takes his beating. He tires his opponent out by, just being there and existing and, offering some resistance, right? We didn't see that against Suk Young Ko, but I think Suk Young Ko, who was supposed to fight Jacoby Smith later up in the card, I think Suk Young Ko is very good. And I think he's got great wrestling. We saw that. I mean, he out-grappled the Welsh gangster for whatever, that's worth. But I do think Suk Young Ko's grappling is really good. So we didn't see that in the Phil Rowe versus Suk Young Ko fight. But, Phil Rowe has a ton of round 3 knockouts. This guy, super entertaining to watch. There was a lot of hype on Phil Rowe coming into the UFC. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like it was a little bit disappointing. He won his UFC debut, and then he did stack a 3-fight win streak. But when it was time to take that step up in competition against Neil Magny, this guy lost. And then he lost to Jake Matthews. And then we see, you see the round 2 KOs again. Phil Rowe takes his beating, tires his opponent out, and then, looks to get that knockout or come back from behind win in round 3. Gian-Paul Labazioni, making his UFC debut. His Contender Series fight was super quick. I remember betting, we had the under in significant strikes for DFS for Gian-Paul, which was fantastic because that covered with ease. But yeah, UFC debut against Phil Rowe. Gian-Paul Labazioni is sitting as a minus 200 favorite right now, which I don't necessarily agree with. Just because this guy's 2 losses are by finish. Gian-Paul Labazioni, in his career. And Phil Rowe's a finisher. If Phil Rowe's going to win, he's going to win by, round 2, round 3 knockout. And so that's what's kind of concerning. Maybe it gets into round 2. And the other thing is his Contender Series fight didn't show us anything. It showed that he had power, but the fight was 2 minutes long. You know what I'm saying? It didn't really show any of his true potential and abilities. You go back and watch some of his regional tape, you understand, get a feel of how he fights. But I'm not too confident from a betting angle. By default, you almost want to play Phil Rowe by, round 2, 3 knockout. Plus 175 underdog, Phil Rowe. This guy Cash is an underdog. He was an underdog against Angelusa in Cash. He's got some value as an underdog. But let's see what that round 2, round 3 KO proper looking like for Phil Rowe. Because those are, I don't want to say default plays, everything's matchup dependent, of course. But, stuff like GM3, round 2, round 3 sub. Some of that's or Fluffy Hernandez, round 4, this isn't a matchup where I think that's going to happen. But Fluffy Hernandez, round 4, round 5 finish. Stuff that's always live. GM3, always live for round 2, always live if he's not getting knocked out in round 1 nowadays. But he used to be always live for a round 2, round 3 sub. And I think, Phil Rowe, round 2, round 3 knockout could just be a default play. Phil Rowe, round 2 KO plus 1,300, round 3 KO plus 1,400. See, that is where I think you could see some value, because if Phil Rowe is going to win, that's his win condition. It's going to be a round 2 or round 3 knockout. I don't see Phil Rowe going to decision with this guy. And not losing, the first 2 rounds. But, minus 200 on Gian-Paul making his debut. And then especially that before, his Contender Series fight. Like I said, the fight was 2 minutes long. You can only get so much information from watching that fight and only understand so much from that specific performance. But, for my official pick, give me Gian-Paul by decision, just because, I don't know where Phil Rowe is really at in his career. I'm thinking he could be towards the end of his career. This guy's an older fighter, older welterweight. He's getting up there in age. I want to say he's 35 or 36. But yeah, I'm picking Gian-Paul to win. I'm not incredibly confident because it's his UFC debut. Phil Rowe is always live for a round 2, round 3 knockout. And that obviously that last performance against Suk Young Ko, not a good look. completely dominated in the grappling, but I don't think John Paul Labazioni is going to be looking to do that here, and I think Phil Rowe might have a little bit more success defending takedowns and getting up off his back in this specific situation. All right, but moving on. Yeah, all right, so for official pick, John Paul Labazioni. For value, I'm thinking Phil Rowe, round 2, round 3 KO. Sprinkle. Like 0.12 units, you know, 0.125 units. All right, we got Ramiz Brahimaj taking on Punahele Soriano. Ramiz Brahimaj, 13-5, 5'10", and set with a 72-inch reach. Punahele Soriano, 12-4, sitting at 5'11 with a 72.5-inch reach. One thing I do want to mention before, I know going back to the Phil Rowe fight, he's also going to have an 8.5-inch reach advantage, too, over John Paul Labazioni. So that's another thing to keep in mind if you're putting John Paul in your parlays this week. But back to Ramiz versus Punahele Soriano. All right, I think this fight goes one of two ways, right? Punahele can win a decision here, right? I like the decision number. I'm thinking it was like it was sitting at like plus 250, plus 275 earlier, I want to say. But Puna can win a decision here, right? He's also got some power in that left hand. But if Puna's smart, you know, and people will say, like, you know, Puna gasses out, Puna, like, you know, can't fight well in round 2, round 3. But, I mean, if you look at Ramiz Brahimaj, you can see where this guy actively falls apart. Like, and halfway through round 2, there's like a mental breaking point, and you can just tell he's not trying anymore. But back to what I was saying, Puna by decision. A lot of people are saying, you know, Puna's cardio is questionable, but I'm thinking Ramiz Brahimaj's cardio is way more questionable, especially if Puna's going to be pushing the grappling. You know, we did see him get round 2, round 3 takedowns in his recent fights against Miguel Baeza and Nikolai Veretennikov. Terrible, boring fight. So boring. I had to rewatching that was not fun, but yeah, he did have some round 2, round 3 success, and he could win a decision here, or he could, you know, Ramiz is ultra durable. This guy, like, you know, does get clipped sometimes, but like he is historically very, very durable. Puna, like, I'm thinking welterweight, moving down to welterweight was the right move for him, right? This is his proper weight class. He's looked good. He's 3-0. That Nikolai Veretennikov fight, I think, was short notice. So, you know, maybe give those guys some wiggle room, especially because Veretennikov just knocked out Nico Price in a pretty, you know, emphatic fashion. So maybe cut him some slack for that. But, yeah, Puna could also stick his head in a guillotine, right? Ramiz has some nasty front chokes, right? He's got guillotine wins over you know, Billy Ray Goff. I'm not sure if that was a guillotine. I don't remember exactly what that was. He caught him in a guillotine at one point, but then Billy Ray Goff got up and then he was able to grab the neck again. I don't remember if it was a guillotine specifically, but yeah, this guy snatches up submissions. He did get that round 1 KO win over Mickey Gall, and his striking, this guy's completely turned around his UFC career. Like, his striking's gotten, like, so much better, so much faster, noticeably better from his UFC debut. But, yeah, like, Puna, like, you can see him sticking his neck into guillotines, and I just can't get it out of my head. Like, I think the value, you know, especially because another thing I want to talk about too, Ramiz Brahimaj, plus 300 underdog against Billy Ray Goff, plus 2-something underdog against Austin Vanderford, gets submission wins in both those fights, gets the guillotine against Vanderford in round 2, right? And now he's lined as a favorite, right? So I'm thinking there could be some value on Punahele Soriano. That being said, Puna's performance against Dustin Stoltzfus, also terrible. You know, Ramiz Brahimaj is also, he's got some nasty front chokes, but he's also a guy that can take your back. And if you go back and watch that Punahele versus Dustin Stoltzfus fight, like, it was pathetic. Like, Puna's crawling on the ground and Dustin just, like, jumps on his back and almost immediately chokes him out. It was terrible. But yeah, like, Ramiz Brahimaj, like, he's got some nasty front chokes. Yeah, maybe, like I said, maybe you forgive Punahele Soriano for the for that bad performance, that little stinker performance against Nikolai Veretennikov. But he also got that round 1 knockout against Uros Medic. Uros Medic, who's all fights, he's also fighting on this card. All end in round 1. But he also, dude, he couldn't knock out Miguel. Another, something else I want to mention too is if Puna's like grounded pounding you, like he's not finishing you. Like those shots, like he's throwing to land volume on the ground. Like they're just barely significant strike shots. Like he's not finishing you on the ground. He might land a ton of grounded pound like he did against Miguel Baeza, Chocolate Thunder. But like yeah, like those grounded pound shots are not hurting anybody. Yeah, Puna's sticking his head into guillotines, dude. I think there could be value on the Puna money line, and the bookies are all over that Ramiz Brahimaj sub. I don't want to say that's his like path to victory, but he's 0-4 to the decision too. So it quite literally is his only path to victory is a finish. And it used to be only submissions. Like this guy used to be like sub or bust, but then he got that knockout over Mickey Gall, and now like he's got 1 knockout and a ton of submissions. But yeah, it quite literally is his only path to victory. For my official prediction, give me Puna Haley Soriano by decision. But could be some value. Maybe on the round 1, because I want to say like 80 or 90% of Ramiz Brahimaj's submissions come in round 1. So, I mean, that Austin Vanderford came in round 2 before the 1.5, under 1.5. If you had that under 1.5, it's still cashed. But yeah, this guy's subbing you early or he's not winning the fight. Next up, Nora Cornoli versus Jocelyn Edwards. We are not talking about that one. Alden Correa versus Louis Garuli. All right. So, big fan of Alden Correa. Big fan of 4 Ounce Fight Club. Shout out Michael Aswell. And, Josh Van, current champion. Michael Aswell, super nice guy. DM him sometimes. But yeah, big fan of their camp. These guys are all super high volume. Not as much Alden Correa. You could see Alden, especially in his regional tape scene, mixing a lot more wrestling. But Michael Aswell and Josh Van are just volume machines. Yeah, Alden Correa coming off of that victory, that win over Alessandro Costa, that knockout win over Alessandro Costa. Something happened with his like pinky toe or something, but he's coming off that knockout win over Alessandro Costa. We cashed on that. We cashed on the knockout prop at plus 800, and we cashed as an Alden Correa as an underdog at plus 330. So Alden Correa 11-3. Standing at 5'8", 67-inch reach, taking on Louis Garule, 5'5", 64-inch reach. As far as how this fight plays out, I'm thinking Louis Garule has had some pretty terrible performances over the last few performances, right? He's coming off like his Dana White's Contender Series performance against Nick Piccinini. Super impressive. He landed a ton of significant strikes. And then he dropped the ball against Ode Osborne, got knocked down in round 2. Ode's got power, and Ode dropped Steve Erceg, but Steve Erceg is a guy that fights to the level of his opponents. But he did get dropped. Ode's got some power, fine, whatever, we can excuse that. But then he goes out there and he gets outstruck by Jesus Aguilar, which was mind-boggling to me. I absolutely, you go rewatch, and he's getting dropped in round 3. Getting not dropped, but wobbled in round 3 by Jesus Aguilar. And it's like, wow. You watch that Piccinini performance, and like he's he looks like a top prospect, and then like he just completely dropped the ball against Ode as a favorite, completely dropped the ball against who did I just mention? Literally, completely drops the ball against Jesus Aguilar as a favorite. Like, that was so bad, dude. Jesus Aguilar's got like those tiny little T-Rex arms that he can only use for guillotines, and he's out there getting outstruck. Luis Garule is also tiny, bro. Like, this guy's 5'5", 64-inch reach. You know, he's like, if there was a straw weight, you know, he could probably cut to 115. He's not a big guy. Alden Correa's going to have the size advantage. As far as how this fight plays out, I'm thinking Alden Correa could mix in the grappling. He could bring it back. We didn't see it too much. We saw his, you know, good reversals, and he actually had more control time than Costa in that fight, even though Costa was looking to engage in the grappling more. But, you know, good defensive, offensive wrestling. I think he could look to mix in the grappling. You know, pretty well-rounded MMA fighter. You know, could look. He's got some power in his hands too. And dude, another thing is Luis Garule. Go back and watch his regional tape. He's getting dropped. He's getting wobbled. Like in a lot of these fights that, you know, he's winning until he just gets hit with something. Then he's, you know, not. You know, the line I think is kind of blown out of proportion. Especially, this is another crazy line movement situation where you get a guy that was a huge underdog in their UFC debut, or not in their UFC debut, for Ramiz Brahimaj in his last, you know, however many fights, and the line is just completely flipped. Now we have Alden Correa literally like at a 180. Like he's sitting at almost a minus 300 right now, and he was a plus 330 underdog, I'm pretty sure, against Alessandro Costa. So, you know, that's a little bit concerning, right? Luis Garule, you know, except for the gosh, I can't get that Jesus Aguilar fight out of my head. Maybe Jesus Aguilar's better than I'm giving him credit for, but I really cannot get that out of my head. Just not a good look. But, yeah, I'm thinking Alden Correa is going to be able to get the dub. Maybe he clips him. For my official pick, give me Alden Correa by knockout, just because Luis Garule chin just sucks. And Alden's got some good power. And he could mix in the grappling, which could make his striking more effective. But, you know, this fight, like I said, could be close until it's not. Until Luis Garule gets hit with something big and is on his back or face on the canvas, you know. So, value, I think the knockout prop earlier in the week was sitting at like minus 270 or plus 275 for Alden Correa. I don't really like the under. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the under. I think this could go either way. Especially if there's a lot of grappling. Like maybe there's just grappling and Correa never gets his knockout shot, but just out grapples Garule, and then wins a little bit of the exchanges on the feet. You know. So as far as value, I'm not going to be betting this fight. Well, actually, no, I did bet this fight on DFS. So there was an angle that we took on premium there. The lines, you know, moved a little bit, but you can still get those plays if you're interested. I put the link in the bio. We got a 7-day free trial going on. But yeah, Alden Correa to win, and then, you know, I'm not betting that fight other than the bet I already put out, but it's a DFS bet, so significant strikes over or under, not anything on Bet Online. All right, next up we got Ode Osborne taking on Alibi Idris. All right, we got Ode Osborne standing 5 feet 7 inches tall with a 73-inch reach. Alibi Idris 5'6" with a 68-inch reach. Right, so Alibi Idris coming off of that Ultimate Fighter finale loss to Joseph Morales, where he was a massive favorite. He was lined as a minus 500 favorite. And that fight, and you know, you go back and look at his tough performances, and you can understand why, right? I think all of the hype was baked into from those performances. He landed such a sneaky flying knee in one of those bouts, and you know, he's got some pretty like powerful long striking for the flyweight division. He's got a really clean 1-2. This guy spins a lot. He's got some spin kicks, some spinning back fists. He's a pretty creative, dynamic striker with those flying knees. Ode Osborne's been knocked out by flying knees before. But yeah, super dynamic striker. And he does mix in the wrestling. You know, he does mix in the grappling. Like we did see him land a takedown against one of his Ultimate Fighter opponents. We did see him land a takedown there towards the end of the round. So he's mixing in those strikes he's mixing in the takedowns that are going to make, you know, his striking more effective. Not as much as, you know, I'd want to see, maybe especially against Ode Osborne, a guy who's been submitted a bazillion times. But he does go to the grappling, which I do think makes his striking more effective. You go, and another thing too I want to mention is from his regional scene tape, this guy has much improved striking defense. Maybe it was just the guys he was fighting, but you go back and watch that Silva fight. That Silva, I forgot which promotion this guy was fighting out of originally, but you go and watch that fight against Silva, and he was eating a lot of shots, against a guy that was like a semi-okay striker, right? And now you go and watch his Ultimate Fighter performances, rewatch those, and his striking defense is much improved, right? He still takes some shots, he still leaves his head out there and his chin out there to be clipped a little bit, but better than before, and he's, a pretty high volume striker with, I think, some pretty explosive finishing ability. Ode Osborne. This guy is a patient striker. I think this, like his striking style, to me, it seems like he uses a lot of leg kicks to set up his powerful shots. He's got a pretty shisty, pretty powerful left hook. Or maybe it's not a left hook. He's got a pretty check hook. He's got a pretty powerful check hook. And he's also got a really long and powerful overhand right. As far as how this fight plays out, Ode's also, he's got some pretty decent jiu-jitsu. He does have a lot of submission wins, weirdly enough, but then he has a ton of submission losses too, which is just so strange. This guy's been finished in the UFC a bazillion times, and like 7 out of his 13 fights, I think, I'm going to count right now. I'm pretty sure it's 7 out of his 13 UFC fights have like gone under the 1.5 round mark. Which is alarming for a flyweight. It's like it's a much higher clip than the divisional average. Yeah, ton of fights going under. And the blueprint to beat Ode Osborne has been kind of laid out. He did look really good against Steve Erceg, I will say that. But like I mentioned earlier, Steve Erceg is a guy that fights to the level of his opponents. A guy that was almost a UFC champion, going to that decision with Alexandre Pantoja, super close fight. But the blueprint on how to beat Ode is there, right? He clipped Steve Erceg, he wobbled him on the feet, but then what did Steve do? He bailed out and shot a takedown, right? And even a hurt like Steve Erceg, who almost literally face planted in the canvas, was able to take down Ode, within a minute and a half of him lunging for that single leg. So I think Alibi could mix in the grappling here, and I think there's some bias just based on Alibi's last performance against Joseph Morales. Joseph Morales is an extremely good fighter, just completely rinsed Matt Schnell in his last bout, and I think Joseph Morales could be a top 10 guy, honestly. But, I think a lot of the hype has brought in people on Ode just because of his last performance against Erceg, that being a loss, but I think he did win round one. And I think that like the loss, wasn't a good look on Alibi, but he's going to be the slightly younger fighter here, and I think he's got so. I don't know. I think he's got more ways to win. I think he could win a decision by mixing in the grappling. I think he could get a submission or a knockout, right? Ode, for me, he's got to knock him out. So minus 120 on Alibi. I kind of like that. And I also really like the value side. I think there's value on that under 1.5. Alibi's a guy, and it got, like I said, explosive finishing abilities, those flying knees. And Ode Osborne, like I said, he's, getting finished early or he's finishing people early. Sometimes he's going to decision, but like I said, at a much higher clip than the divisional average, he's getting finished or finishing his opponent. So for my official prediction, give me Alibi Idris by knockout. But, I think there could be value on that, too. I think Alibi moneyline, Idris by knockout, under 1.5. I think all those are, pretty solid looks here, again, in this, flyweight bout. I'm actually super excited for this one just because I want to see Alibi Idris bounce back. Not that I want to see him bounce back. I want to see if he bounces back. Just because I was pretty hyped on him after his Ultimate Fighter performances. I literally turned on the Ultimate Fighter to watch his fights, like at the end when it first came out. Now you can see one of the fights on YouTube and then forgot where the other one was. But I was actually excited to see him, and so I'm excited to see how this fight plays out. Um, oh, we got Trav. Oh, very good. My guy. You're so cool. It's a pleasure to work with you. My guy. I appreciate you. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you visiting and liking it up. You're the man. Appreciate that. And shout out for the graphics, bro. Like if you guys ever need graphics, the Score More on Instagram. I should do a better job at reposting his handle when I post my graphics, but I'm laser focused on whatever I'm doing. But phenomenal work. Appreciate you, Trav. Thanks for tuning in. Let's see. All right, moving on. We got Chi Njokuani versus Carlos Leal. All right, so Carlos Leal, 5'11" with a 74-inch reach. Chidi Njokuani, 6'3" with an 80-inch reach. This guy is a massive, massive welterweight. He has missed weight in his last 2 fights, and I'm thinking he could miss weight again. He's also going to have a 6-inch reach advantage. So a lot of people, this line came crashing down. Chidi Njokuani was a plus 155 underdog earlier in the week. Like I think it was like plus 170, plus 180. He opened at plus 170, plus 180, right? Comes crashing down, like on Tuesday or Monday. Somebody released a bet on Chidi, and that line crashed, right? And so at first I was like, when I was looking at this, before any film or going back and watching these fights, I was like, Carlos Leal minus 180, could be a good bounce back spot, right? So like minus 180 to me, like before film, like seems like, oh, okay, maybe that could be something I look into, right? After film, absolutely not, wasn't going to be laying any minus 180 on Carlos Leal, just because like his PFL and LFA performances are not near as impressive as his UFC performances. Say what you want, he's 1-2 in the UFC, but he also got absolutely robbed by Rinat Fakhretdinov in his last fight. Or not his last fight, his UFC debut. Like absolutely fleeced, complete robbery. I think that fight was, somewhere in the Middle East, so obviously he was getting fleeced. If it was going to decision, not, a bad look there, right? I think he could have won all 3 rounds, honestly, but he goes out, treats Alex Morono like the punching bag that he has become, right? So executes well there, and then Muslim Salikov sits down on a punch, right? This guy's never been knocked out in like 28, I think it was 28 professional fights, hadn't gotten knocked out. And 75-year-old Muslim Salikov sits down on a punch and sits down Carlos Leal. And, this is a fight where I originally liked Carlos Leal, but you go back and watch his fight against Sibadu C. He fought him twice and lost both times in the PFL. One time he was above the contracted weight limit, and so he lost a point because that's how PFL works, or at least the PFL tournament. So he did lose a point in that split decision loss the second time. He was able to mix in his grappling a lot more the second time. But yeah, he struggled with the range and he struggled with the footwork of C. And I don't think Chidi has as good a footwork, but Chidi also has this very, very similar physical attributes and a more violent style than C. And I think he could be like if this fight takes place in the clinch or at a range where Chidi's kicking Carlos Leal and Carlos Leal is struggling to close the distance like he is against C, Chidi could look like, a pretty big favorite here. But at the same time, Chidi's been finished a bazillion times in the UFC, and like he's kind of, I don't want to say he's kill or be killed, but he's a really bad nail. Like he's a really bad nail. He's a good hammer, but like any kind of adversity at all with this guy, any kind of adversity with Chidi, this guy's folding, right? Like against Gregory Rodriguez, he landed that disgusting knee in round 1. That disgusting knee that split RoboCop open right here, right? Rewatching that was absolutely insane. I'm so surprised how RoboCop didn't get like just like keep going forward and like land his face into the canvas there. But like, yeah, Cheedy had that nasty knee, but then he like gets taken down, right? And then just gets like it's not even like he like got dropped. Like he was getting pieced up a little bit. You know, it was pretty violent exchanges there, but he gets taken down and like just gets pounded. Like he just shells up. And same thing with against Mikal. Like he's on the ground, shells up. So he's also 37 too. It's like 37-year-old welterweight that's really struggling to cut weight against a guy that, in my opinion, has less MMA miles, even though he, has had more fights, or a similar amount, no, not more, but a similar amount of fights. He's younger, and he's also like, it was one knockout. You know what I'm saying? Muslim Salikov does have power. I was thinking if like he got knocked out, it was gonna be one of those spinning wheel kicks, but yeah, I'm leaning Carlos Leal here. I am. I'm leaning Carlos Leal. The value that was on Cheedy, I think, is gone. That you're paying -150 for the under 1.5. Which if Carlos Leal goes out there and fights like a psychopath, another benefit for Leal is I think he started like really taking the supplement game really seriously, like really started locking in on those supplements. Because you see he's got that incredible back knee, that it might be superhuman strength, that the back knee's giving him. So yeah, I'm leaning Carlos Leal here. I'm leaning Carlos Leal. I don't actually have a bet on this fight yet. I'm not sure if I'll get to a bet on this fight, just because this fight, and then there's another fight that we're going to talk about, Zachary Reese versus Michel Pereira, later up on this card, that are, to me, just too many variables. Carlos Leal coming off that knockout loss. We don't know how he's going to fight after a knockout loss. Maybe he's timid and scared, and then he just lets Cheedy kick and poke at him for 2 rounds, 3 rounds. Maybe this fight goes to decision at like plus 400 because Carlos Leal's afraid and he just gets kickboxed by a Muay Thai Cheedy for 15 minutes. Like, I don't know. I'm hoping Carlos Leal goes out there and looks to swing hard because I think, the pressure could absolutely just fold Cheedy. But I also think he could catch one, closing the distance. You know what I'm saying? Maybe he goes in for a takedown and gets absolutely kneed in the face and then flatlined. But I also think he wasn't expecting that shot too from Muslim Salikov. Like, you can tense up your neck and kind of like, hold your neck in a way that helps you absorb the shots. But I just, maybe he wasn't expecting that and he just got cleanly clipped. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. So, the value on Cheedy gone, I'm thinking. So for my official pick, give me Carlos Leal by knockout. For value, I don't have any value side here, honestly. I don't have any value side. Maybe a Carlos Leal money line, maybe. At -130 though, you're still laying chalk on a guy that just got knocked out by a 75-year-old man. So I don't know about that. But yeah, like I said, don't have a bet on this yet. Probably won't get there. We'll see. All right, we got Zach Reese starting off the main card, taking on Michel Pereira. I'm actually super excited for this fight. I know a lot of people aren't. You know what I'm saying? Just because of the latest performances from Michel Pereira, but I'm super excited. I'm super excited and curious to see how he comes back here against Zach Reese, who I think is an incredible step down in competition. Say what you want about Kyle Dawkins, his striking much improved from his first UFC stint. You go back and watch the striking from his first UFC fights. He's slow. He's lower volume. He's not, landing like his shots don't look crisp. He doesn't like have any like pop on his shots to me, it looked like. But you go back now and you look at some of his more recent regional tape on paired with that knockout over Michel Pereira, this guy's striking is much improved. This is still a drastic step down. Zach Reese is a drastic step down from Kyle Dawkins. New and improved Kyle Dawkins Dark Knight 2.0. Not the old Kyle Dawkins, but the Dark Knight 2.0, absolutely a huge step down. But yeah, I'm so curious to see how this fight goes. There's so many variables here, right? that knockout from Kyle Dawkins. Let me go to the measurables first, right? Zach Reese, 6'4", 77-inch reach. Michel Pereira, 6'1", 73-inch reach. So many variables, though. Like I was saying, so many variables. Like, it all started off with Fluffy Hernandez. You know, Fluffy did to Michel Pereira what Fluffy does to the majority of the middleweight division, right? I mean, we saw the same thing essentially against Roman Dolidze. Michel Pereira actually lasted longer than Roman Dolidze in that fight. Fluffy's just that good, in my opinion. Fluffy can just absolutely cook guys that aren't ready for him, and Michel wasn't ready for him. But he took his soul because, you know, he went out there and did absolutely nothing against Abus Nurmagomedov, who I do think is a pretty solid kickboxer. But, you know, Michel's throwing dynamic shots. Like, it's like Michel was out there afraid of getting knocked out. You know, even though he didn't really get, he got milked against Fluffy. You know, he got drained, right? He didn't get, absolutely, he didn't get just knocked out cold, not cold, but knocked out like he did against Kyle Dawkins, you know. So he goes out there, fights all timid, does absolutely nothing, you know. Looks like a, you know, almost fake performance from him considering his previous bouts. But this is a guy that's finished Michel Oleksiejczuk, right? This is a guy that is doing backflips in the octagon mid-fight and landing on his opponents and then beating them within the next minute and a half. You know, I get Ihor Potieria is, you know, not the best level of competition, but is he that far off from where Zach Reese is at? If this was Michel Pereira 2 years ago, this is a max bet at -140 or -150, whatever the line's at now. This is a max bet, right? And this is still just such a drastic step down in competition. I feel bad. You know, I don't want to be just shitting on Zach Reese. You know, he's got that knockout win over Julian Marquez. He's got a decision win over Dusko Todorovic, a decision win against Jose Medina, who everybody thought was unfinishable, and then he's been finished twice now. And he's like I said, I always maintain in these videos, the UFC signs guys that are just punching bags. They keep guys around that are just punching bags. You know what I'm saying? For people's entertainment value, they keep guys around. And Jose Medina to me is one of those guys. So it's what, you're going to decision with Jose Medina. You're going to decision. You're almost getting finished by Dusko Todorovic. You're almost getting finished by Jackson McVeigh. And Michel Pereira's -140. I don't know. It's very tempting. It's very, 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 very tempting to lay that -140 on Michel Pereira. People are also saying, the other narrative I'm hearing all week is that, you know, Michel Pereira's not locked in. He's playing GTA, but you go and look at his YouTube, and I mean, he seems pretty locked in. He's training with Sean Strickland, Johnny Walker, decent competition. I mean, decent guys that would, you know, provide decent, you know, rounds, you know, for good competitive rounds, I should say, you know, sparring rounds. And what's Zach Reese's path to victory here? Is it, you know, is Michel Pereira's chin toast? Because he has gotten knocked out earlier in his career, you know, so I don't want to say it's toast. I think it could be a situation where he just maybe wasn't expecting the Darce Knight to land such a powerful punch. But, you know, I think Zach Reese has to knock out Michel Pereira to win. I think even if Michel Pereira goes out there and fights just like he did against Abus Magomedov, I think if he goes out there and fights just like that, he could still beat Zach Reese, who does also essentially nothing in rounds 2 and round 3 on the feet, you know? So Michel Pereira -140, so tempting. A lot of people are on Zach Reese. I don't know why. I did bet on Zach Reese as an underdog against Julian Marquez, but this guy also makes bad fight decisions too. He's pulling Asmat Bakoyev into his guard just to get punched into oblivion, right? And he's taking damage too. He got body slammed by Cody Brundage, and he got knocked unconscious by Asmat Bakoyev, and then the ref took his head and then slammed it back into the canvas. So it's a double concussion knockout. You know, not a good look, right? Especially against a guy who's really Michel Pereira's got such an awkward striking style. you look at his film and you look at his striking, and he's just throwing shots from the weirdest angles, right? Super awkward striking style, super hard to prepare for, super violent, right? You go and watch him finish Mikhail Olasechuk, super violent. Hurts him on the feet with that nasty, nasty body shot, and then goes and grabs his neck and like just toys with him like a kid, right? If like I said, if this is Michel Pereira 2 years ago, absolutely running through Zach Reese. But at this point, you're like the Reese bettors. I think are the argument is that we're fading Pereira. Like it's just a Pereira fade, not anything on Zach Reese. Like the guys that are betting on Zach Reese, I feel like are guys that are just fading Michel Pereira at the end of his career, or what could be at the end of his career. But for my official pick, give me Michel Pereira by finish. Like honestly, like I think he goes out there and gets the finish. Like I really do. I think he could come back. I do think he's does look a little bit locked in from his YouTube. Maybe not his Instagram. I did see he was playing GTA 6 for like 6 hours. He's streaming GTA 6, but from his YouTube, training with the right guys, getting the right rounds in. This fight's going to be violent. The under 1.5 is also at -125. I think there's a lot of recency bias baked into that line, just because of the Dusko Todorovic decision, the Jose Medina decision from Zach Reese, and the decision from Abus Nurmagomedov with Michel Pereira. So the majority of Michel Pereira's fights at middleweight, do end in round 1 or 2. And so I'm thinking, the value could be on a Michel Pereira finish, could be on the under 1.5, just in case that chin is actually toast. I really like the 1.5 actually, because Zach Reese has a ton of fun. Like if Zach Reese isn't going to a sloppy, disgusting decision with somebody that he shouldn't be going to a sloppy, disgusting decision with, I think he wins. Or not wins. I think he is finishing the fight. Like his fights finish early too. Like the Julian Marquez fight, Cody Brundage fight, and so on and so forth. So moving on. We got Jacoby Smith taking on the muscle hamster, Josiah Harrell. Jacoby Smith, 5'10" with a 72-inch reach. Josiah Harrell, 5'7", and his reach is not there yet, but I think it's on UFC stats, so let's look it up. I want to say I remember seeing that. Josiah Harrell, muscle hamster, 68-inch reach. Yep, Bud's got a 68-inch reach. All right, so Jacoby Smith, blue chip prospect, right, or a perceived blue chip prospect. DC is very high on this guy, comparing him to Khabib Nurmagomedov, right? He's got great takedowns. He's got great ground and pound. Some of the best ground and pound in the division, right? I think he's actually super dangerous early on the ground, extremely dangerous early on the ground. And he's got some good wrestling and some good top control, and he's shown he can get submissions like his last fight against Nico Price. But he also throws bombs on the feet. Like he's got some serious power. He's looking to throw those, crazy highlight reel overhands. Carry some serious power on the feet. He's so dangerous early. But Josiah Harrell, right, also a prospect that's undefeated, right? Both these guys are undefeated prospects. Coming in, right? This is the second time he was supposed to be in the UFC. His first time was against JDM, but he had to pull out because of a brain injury, right? So it's been a few years since then. I think that was the fight where JDM ended up fighting like Basil Hafez or something, and then almost lost to Basil Hafez in just like a slop fight. But yeah, so I have some concerns, right? Jacoby Smith has gone to decision twice. In those 2 decision wins, and he's fighting like decent levels of competition, but like in Fury FC, right? So decent level of competition, but those 2 decision wins, you don't see it, but you do. You can see him getting a little bit tired. You can see he's not as explosive as he is. If he's not able to land the takedowns, right? He looks kind of not like a fish out of water, right? In rounds 2 and 3. But he looks like there could be some questionable cardio concerns, especially just because he's a guy that comes out there and looks to finish early in round 1, right? So those 2 fights that went to decision, he won those fights, but I think it's because his opponents gassed out more than he did, right? you can see he loses if he's not in that top control, right? If he's not like I feel like he musters all the like in rounds 2 and round 3, he musters all the energy at the beginning of a round to shoot a takedown, right? And if that takedown is stuffed, right? If that takedown is stuffed, I could be a little bit concerning, right? Because the second thing that I want to bring up is that Nico Price fight, right? I had him in a round 1-2 finish. Thank goodness I played that round 2 finish, right? So we did cash on that as premium members. Like all my premium members cashed on that. But it was a little bit concerning because he exhausted all of his efforts trying to finish Nico Price in round 1. He wasn't able to do so. I think, rewatching that fight, I think he took the first minute and a half of round 2 off against Nico Price because he knew Nico wasn't going to offer any threat, to then gain that energy back to land or shoot that takedown, right? That ultimately, I know Nico Price slipped, but he mustered up enough energy to start trying to throw big bombs and finish the fight after taking that first minute off, right? So if Josiah Harrell, who's a guy, who's won decisions, and a guy also who has a ton of round 3 finishes, more round 3 knockouts than round 2 and round 1, right? He's a guy that's going to go, and if he, offers some resistance, right, he's got some pretty decent grappling. He looks to mix in the takedowns. I like another guy that looks to mix in the takedowns because his striking's effective. Like, he's got some pretty good flow. Like, he stays on top control. He's got flow, good, somewhat decent, good flowy top control. And I think if he weathers the storm in round 1, offers some resistance to the takedowns, makes Jacoby work, that he could be live in rounds 2 and round 3. Absolutely, Jacoby could finish him in round 1, right? So I do like that Jacoby round 1 knockout play. Brain injury, kind of scary, you know what I'm saying? Not something that you want to, be going, I don't know, like, it seems like you got to check out. He's going to be, he's a young fighter, so, young guys recover quick. Ooh. And are, healthy, or get healthy quicker, typically, than older guys. But I think he could be a live dog here. I think he could honestly be a live dog. And Jacoby at minus 300 is not enticing to me at all whatsoever. I think the way to go with this maybe would be a Jacoby round 1 KO or a Muscle Hamster win. I think you can get plus money on both of those. And it could be a good look. But for my official prediction, give me Josiah Hall. Or Harrell, Josiah Harrell by decision. Give me the Muscle Hamster by decision. Next up, we got Sergey Spivak taking on Ante Delia. Sergey Spivak, 6'3", 78-inch reach. Ante Delia, 6'3", 78-inch reach. So Ante Delia coming off of that stoppage that he thought he won, where he poked Waldo in the eye, and then the adrenaline dump happened, then he got knocked out again. Not knocked out again. There was just another knockout again in the same fight. But yeah, he got knocked out, and it wasn't the best look for him. He's a guy that likes to come forward earlier. If you go back and watch some of his earlier fights, this guy's a very seasoned vet. Tons of fights, outside of the UFC. He's a training partner of Tom Aspinall. But this guy looks to go and finish in fights early, right? He'll blitz forward, look to land flurries of shots, and I think that's something that Sergey Spivak could struggle with, right? Sergey Spivak, another guy that I think is a good hammer when he's on top and getting his jiu-jitsu going, or in a position to get a sub like that armbar against Marcin Tybura, but not a good nail, right? I mean, he came off a impressive performance against Waldo's. I think that was just a bad performance from Waldo. Waldo was fighting I think it was a semi-short notice. It had to be on not too much notice because Waldo fought 5 times last year. But could have been. I think that performance was a fluke performance. If Sergey is going to be on top, he could be winning this fight. If Ante swarms him early, he's going to get a knockout. Sergey Spivak's been clipped before. We saw Cyril Gane. Sometimes the volume piles up on Spivak, and I think Ante Delia could get that knockout here. But Ante Delia, a guy that's been finished a bunch too, so I wouldn't be surprised if Spivak somehow got this fight to the ground. He could get a submission, could maybe get some top control time. But for my official prediction here, give me Ante Delia. Give me Ante Delia by round 1 knockout. value on that. I'm not sure any value on that like specific prop, but let me see what that number's at right now. Ante Dalia versus Sergey Spivak. No, yeah, no value on that. Plus 210 for the round one knockout. So we'll not be playing that. What's the under 1.5 at? It's at minus 132. Not bad. Not bad for a fight that I think could end super early. You go back and you look at some of Spivak's fights. I know that Cyril Gane fight ended a little bit later. Uh, yeah. Oh, and the other. Oh gosh, I forgot even to mention dude getting knocked out by Jalton Almeida. Like, geez, that has not aged well. But you know, those his two of his last three fights have ended in round one. Ante Dali is a guy that is going to be super aggressive, especially early. Um, and Sergey's not, like I said, not a good nail. You know, guy doesn't like the pressure, didn't like the pressure against Gone, no, which ended in round two. But after the 1.5 mark, didn't like the pressure against Shelton Almeida. Like, yeah, give me Ante Dalia by knockout. Under 1.5, maybe could have some value. I don't have any bets on this fight as of right now. Probably not going to change, but we will see. All right, Dan Ige taking on Melquizael Costa. Melky is one of my favorite fighters in the UFC. I just like his fight style. I think like he's super aggressive. I love playing his sub prop. We had the sub prop against Andre Feely, where Andre kind of stuck his neck back into the guillotine, but you know we still cashed. I think it was like a plus 700 prop. Love playing his sub props. I think he's always live first sub. Um, I love the way he strikes. I love his kick game. He's blasting body kicks. If this fight's at kick range, Melky's gonna have a very advantageous fight. Danny is not a very big moment winner. I mean minute winner. He's like a knockout or bust almost. Not all, like I said, not every single time, matchup dependent of course, but lately it seems like he's knockout or bust. Like that Sean Woodson fight was super close. And this is kind of a spot where you want to be getting Dan Ige as an underdog against a step down in competition. Pretty sizable underdog too, plus 180. I'm looking at right now. Yeah, plus 180 on the Dan Ige money line. Yeah, plus 182 on the Dan Ige money line. Melky Costa, we'll go over the tail of the tape. Melky Costa 5'10 with a 71-inch reach. Dan Ige going to be the shorter guy, 5'7 with a 71-inch reach. Yeah, like I said, Melky, love the kick game, love his striking style. I will say his kick game fades and his distance management ability kind of decreases as the fight goes on. But and he's super hittable in round three. And Danny Gay's got some pretty good round threes. He won round three against Diego Lopez. He got that round three knockout against Sean Woodson. This guy's pretty solid in round three. So as the fight progresses, I might get a little bit more worried for Melky. Danny Gay does sometimes mix in the offensive wrestling. I think Melky could mix in the offensive wrestling. I think if this fight is on the ground, or Melky could take his back. We've seen Danny Gay give up his back against Diego Lopez. And I think Melky could be live for a sub here too. But if Danny Gay's not winning moments, I struggle to see him like winning this fight. Like if Melky's just gonna blast kicks from the outside, keep the fight at his distance, mixing the takedowns when he wants to, I feel like Dan Ige gonna struggle. But Dan Ige, I feel like becomes more live as the fight goes on, as Melky does eat a lot of shots. You know what I'm saying? So as the fight goes on, I'm thinking Dan Ige might have a better chance to win. For my official pick, give me Melky by decision, but honestly, the under 2.5 I think has some value. Just because I know Dan Ige has never been finished. Let me double check that. I don't think Dan Ige's. Yep, no, I was right. Danny Gay, never been finished. All 10 losses come by decision, 7 and 10 to the decision. So that is kind of where my reasoning is. I think Melky, if this fight goes to the decisions, goes the to decision 9 times out of 10, not 9 times out of 10, 8 times out of 10, he's winning that decision. Just because of his kick range that I think he can keep here. But, like I said, he does leave his chin open for a lot of damage and shots. And Danny Gay's not the guy that you want to be eating shots from. So I like the under 2.5. I think that Ige could stick his head into a guillotine. Melky's got some slick, guys, don't get finished till they do. So, like Morgan Charrier hadn't been finished in a while, and we that's another thing I like playing Melky's under 2.5 rounds because I think these guys, to me in my head, have around a 60% chance each. Fights to not go the decision in my head, right? And like the implied probability on the under 2.5 at like plus 230 or whatever it's at, like if both these guys are not going to decision 60% of the time, there's some value there, plus 230 on the, that's like a 30% chance. The bookies are saying, right, this fight has a 30% chance to go under. I'm thinking this is more of like a 50-50 on whether it goes under 2.5 rounds, just because I think, the equity there, or like the idea behind that, is maybe because Danny Gay's never been finished. But like I said, Melky's a guy that finishes guys that, haven't been finished in a while, or, haven't been finished. He could lock up a sub. Andre Fili had 2 other sub losses. He locked up a sub, against Andre Fili. He could take his back. He's got, those head kicks that we've seen. But, Danny Gay could also clip him. So I do really like the because I feel like it covers a lot of Danny Gay, all of Danny Gay's. Yeah, I really like that under 2.5. I feel like it covers all of Danny Gay's finishing a bit, upside, or winning equity rather, and a lot, or maybe 30-40% of Melky's win equity. So yeah, I like the under 2.5. For my official pick, it'd be Melky by decision, but under 2.5, definitely worth a play. Jeff Neal taking on Uros Medic. I don't want to go too deep into this one because I feel like, it's going to be a round 1 finish, right? Uros Medic has never been to a decision. 100% finish rate. Every single one of his wins come by finish. But Jeff Neal, I don't want to say a shell of himself, but definitely not what he once was. He's coming off of like that alcohol abuse thing too. We got a comment too. Brian Fisher, Costa and over 2.5. Bro, dude, nah. I don't know about the over 2.5. No, I really don't. That's too juiced, dude. I don't like that. I like Costa. I like Costa. If you're gonna do that, I would just play Costa by decision, right? If you like that play, I would just play Costa by decision, as opposed to laying juice on both the over and Costa. But yeah, all right, back to Jeff Neal versus Uros Medic. Jeff Neal coming off that. Jeff Neal 5'11", 75-inch reach. Uros Medic 6'1" with a 71-inch reach. Jeff Neal, not a shot. He's just not as fast. Like he used to but again, his level of competition's been insane. This is an example of why, the UFC and matchmaking, guys that are exciting fighters, even though they get knocked out. Uros Medic, gets dropped by Gilbert Urbina, gets knocked out by Puna's left hand, but he's still super exciting, so that's why he's getting this ranked opportunity in Jeff Neal. But yeah, Jeff Neal fighting alcohol abuse the last 5 years. You can maybe see it in his fights, I don't know. Somebody's going to sleep early. People forget about the power Jeff Neal's got. Jeff Neal's got fast hands. Hands of steel Jeff Neal, right? There's a reason why he's called Hands of Steel Jeff Neal, right? Uros Medic, 100% finish rate. I don't see this fight getting out of round 1. Somebody's going to punch somebody in the face, and both these guys' chins are just don't exist. I mean, not Jeff Neal really. He's coming off of that just insane spinning back elbow, but yeah, no, somebody's getting knocked out in round one. Give me Uros Medic, round one knockout. Fading the guy that is coming off of alcohol withdrawals. All right, so that takes us to the all right, value too. We'll talk about value for Jeff Neal versus Uros Medic. What does the fight end in round one look like? What does the fight end in round one look like? Dang, we gotta go into Hard Rock for that one. Give me a second, boys. We're gonna look. I don't have a bet on this one. The round one KO is minus 130. That's I don't. I mean, I think that honestly, like, I that might be a play. Minus 130 fights ends by KO in round one. I feel like there's just so much upside. I mean, what's going to happen is Uros Medic not going to get knocked out in round one if he doesn't knock out Jeff Neal in round one? Like, I just think it's just going to be a round one finish. So minus 130 on that, maybe could have some value, but haven't bet that fight yet. But all right, moving on to the main event: Sean Strickland versus Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. Sean Strickland 6'1" with a 76-inch reach. Anthony Hernandez 6'0" with a 75-inch reach. I first want to talk about the line. That's the first thing I want to talk about. Anthony Hernandez sitting as almost a minus 300 favorite, minus 270 against Sean Strickland. I think that could be a little bit wide. Sean Strickland's a guy that has pretty good defensive wrestling, good offensive wrestling, like a semi-decent, wrestling, not credentials, but ability and skills. So that's kind of where I think Fluffy could meet some resistance, right? So Fluffy against Brendan Allen, another guy that has pretty good defensive wrestling. I don't want to say he struggled, but he gave up positions. Not that I think Sean Strickland's going to be getting reversals, but I think he could not stymie Hernandez, but maybe like delay the pressure and effectiveness until later in the fight. But Sean Strickland's pretty one dimensional. Jab kick, jab, teep kick, leg kick, march forward, right? If he's not effective, if he's not marching forward. So if Hernandez can put him on the back foot, which you think he does, towards the end of the fight, he could look minus 270, round 4, round 5. I think he could frustrate. I could totally see, Sean Strickland going in there and just getting frustrated, with Hernandez and just getting bored of the fight and just getting unentertained, and kind of freaking out. And I think if you go back and rewatch that Fluffy versus Delitze fight, Fluffy's breaking this guy. He's making him stand up and then takes him down and then making him stand up again and then just takes him down, hangs on him for 30 seconds, 45 seconds, lands a few punches, makes him stand back up. If Fluffy gets Strickland into that game, I think we could see, a cardio edge here, Even though Strickland historically has had excellent cardio, Fluffy is going to be pushing the pace for all 5 rounds, right? I think it does go to decision. I think Sean Strickland's submission defense, might be good enough to not get finished. But you go back and look at the Kamaru Usman fight. Kamaru Usman, a goat. But you go back and look at that Usman fight, and he just got dominated, right? Like Usman had more than 60% control time in that fight, and a lot of it Sean spent on his back. Usman's got some excellent wrestling and even better striking than Fluffy, but still, like I feel like that's like the most similar opponent in my opinion of a guy that's going to be like wrestling Sean Strickland in Sean Strickland's career. So, ooh. So, like, if Fluffy gets his game going, like, I struggle to see how Sean looks good in rounds 3, 4, and 5. I think he's going to get frustrated. I think Fluffy's going to be able to mix in the takedowns and, do similarly, not as bad, because I think Sean Strickland is a much better fighter, but, like, do something kind of similar to what he did against Brendan Allen, and Roman Dolidze. I mean, the Brendan Allen fight was a lot better for Brendan Allen than the Roman Dolidze fight was for Roman Dolidze. But, I think it's going to be a combination of that. I think it's going to be a combination of Hernandez toying with him. I think it's going to be a combination of Hernandez, maybe holding him in positions but still winning control time with knees. But yeah, I see some value maybe on the over Hernandez takedown props. I love laddering those. We cashed huge last time because he had like a ton of takedowns against Roman Dolidze, and we played it up until 7. And so we just cashed on all those takedown overs, laddering it up there. But, the line's a little bit wide just because I do think like there's not too much finish upside for Hernandez here. So minus 270 on a fight that could go to decision. I don't think you can really be laying that, but I do like the over takedowns. I do like, I like the over takedowns attempts there. For my official pick, give me Anthony Hernandez to win. But for the value, give me the over takedowns, right? So, as you guys know, picks are very different from bets. This is the end of the stream, so I'm gonna do a quick shout out to the service, that I run. Every single week, giving you guys PFL, Octagon, UFC bets every single week for UFC. Sometimes for PFL and Octagon because we don't have PFL and Octagon every single week. Or Octagon, is much more. There's a lot of Octagon bouts, but we don't do all of the Octagon bouts. We do every single UFC card. So, last year, up over 100 units. This year, we're down 5%. We're down just about 2.5 units. All the bets are tracked to the winnable. I got to figure out a way to like have a true third-party verification system because you guys can see if I were to go and edit a winnable post like after the fight like already happened to like change my results or like fake stats or something, like all my subscribers will get a notification and there would be another notification that's timestamped saying I'm editing it, right? So obviously I haven't done that because I'm not a fraudulent guy, and I would never make up results because you can't make up results. Like, I mean, you can, but you're not going to get anywhere in this industry if you're not consistent and actually, successful at betting on whatever sport you do. So I got to think of a way to really like not isolate, but like do a third party verification for the bets. Right now I'm like just tracking everything through Winnable. So you theoretically you can see that I haven't edited anything or changed any of my bets that I've already posted. But we got to figure out a way to be third party verified. And my problem with that is I wanted, you can use Bet MMA Tips, right? But that only tracks your like specific bets. Like it doesn't take my DFS, which I'm extremely profitable on DFS. So it's like, why would I not include like 40% of my bets on like, it's not really like I'm tracking myself then or providing, accurate results because I don't have you can't implement the underdog bets on Bet MMA Tips. So, we're going to figure out a way. Right now we're doing Winnable. So like I said, free trial we have going on. Tap the link in the bio. Like I said, down 2.45 units this week, but we are going to be bouncing back this week. I've already locked in those DFS bets. I have a bunch of bets locked in on this card. it's only a matter of time before last week we had like 10 week events in a row, where we just did not lose for 10 weeks. Weeks where we had 10 unit weeks, back to back, 10, 6, 9 unit weeks, right? It's only a matter of time. Stick with the consistency. If you're betting good EV, if you're betting good numbers in the right fighters, in the right matchups, variance, we've also had some bad variance, in the last 2 weeks too. I'm not going to say that about everything, but there was, like the Yizov fight, that swings us into a positive night. Stuff like that. So stick with the program. I recommend, if you're going to subscribe for the long run, because you're not going to benefit if you're not tailing me every single week and getting the same exact results every single week like I am. But like I said, if you guys are interested, we got a 7-day free trial going on in the Winnable. Tap in, and we will see you guys next time.